Welcome to Kindly Neurodivergent with Kay. Before we start, a quick note. This episode is for educational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. If you notice pauses during our conversation, that's natural, we're processing or reflecting, and it's part of how we talk. Today I have Nicole Milo with me. She will be discussing Caleb's journey with autism in the story of House of Hope. Welcome, Nicole.
Thank you. Okay. It's great to be here with you. I'm honored. Ugh.
Please introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Nicole. I am a mom of five. I have an amazing, supportive husband, and our children are Caleb is 22. We have two girls that are 21, and then I have a 13 and a 12-year-old. And we all work together to help each other. And I consider myself super blessed. And I would say that professionally, I've been on a 20-year journey of advocacy for those that are the most vulnerable, have higher level of need, complex medical, and profound autism, which is what my son Caleb has. And that journey has brought me to a place where I've created an agency and a nonprofit so that we could better serve this population that's often left out.
Teamwork is always helpful.
It really is. I don't know what I would do without all the support. It's incredible. Yeah.
Can you tell us about Caleb and his journey to receiving an autism diagnosis?
Yeah, I would love to. Caleb was born healthy. He hit all of his milestones regularly. He was able to speak one and two words he was putting together. He was a very happy baby. And then he got really sick. He started showing almost an overnight type of regressive type of an autism symptoms. And then lots of hospitalizations and challenges over the next few years. And, fortunately, he was diagnosed with autism at age 2. And I sort of sprung into action and went right into early intervention mode. He got um, quite a rigorous program of services because the regression was so drastic. I really wanted him to give him the best chance possible. And that journey ultimately ended up with him being what they call out of district placed from a public school setting into a specialized autism school setting, which was in Connecticut. And they were wonderful. They tried to utilize just different approaches, ABA, occupational therapy, physical therapy. Um, and ultimately, it just wasn't the best setting for Caleb. He really needed 24/7 programming for consistency to help him reduce his behaviors. So he was really struggling with frustration with not being able to communicate. And he started to get really self-injurious, and we needed to really help give him the best chance at being able to communicate. So we made the really hard decision of getting him into one of the best autism schools in the country. So, um, and that school happened to be 3 hours away from us. So it was a really tough thing for me as a mom, but I also believed in Caleb. I also believed that he could do it and I was not going to give up. And so if that meant he had to go to this school who really understood him and could teach him how to use an iPad um, for communication, whatever it took, I was willing to do it. And he started thriving at this autism school and rapidly gaining skills, which was, many so-called experts said he would never do. And he wasn't able to learn, and he was all these things. And I said, no, he has potential, and we're not giving up. So, yeah, he was there only a month and he was toilet trained. And then within several months, he started using the PECS communication system. And we started to see behaviors get better as far as him self-injuring. He was, you could see that he was starting to blossom and emerge as an individual. So it's beautiful.
At what age did he get sick?
Caleb was right around 19 months old when he got really sick. He had 105 fever. He stopped looking at us, and then he started having lots of immune issues. And yeah, I know it's kind of a controversial topic with autism. I'll be honest with you. It is. So it's a little hard to talk about, but I don't mind being transparent, but Caleb got really sick after his vaccines. He developed measles, head to toe, 105 fever, and his head circumference swelled. So he exhibited a lot of symptoms of encephalitis or an encephalopathy. And then we did lab work and immune testing, and it confirmed that his body really was unable to create antibodies and just had a lot of inflammatory issues happening after that point.
What didn't work in the public school system, and was he on medication during the public school system time?
That's a great question. Well, I could tell you they loved him very much. I had always, over the years, even from a young age, developed great relationships with educators. Even though I was a fierce advocate, I always wanted to give them respect because I think there are people that really care, right? Yeah. So, I just felt blessed with the people that loved Caleb, but his motor execution, and I'm not sure what the word would be for it, but he is never able to stop moving, really. He's sort of like always going, always um unable to regulate. I guess that would be the word, neurologically regulate his body. So that
Sensory integration.
what is, yes, exactly. Very, yes, you hit it right on the head there. Yeah, his sensory needs were really significant. And he would elope a lot, which was a very dangerous, it was a very dangerous behavior because he was constantly trying to escape the classroom. He was unable to be restrained because he's double jointed. He has a lot of low muscle tone. So he would wiggle his way out of every situation. And so it was really hard for educators to understand, how do we even get this little boy to be able to sit and to be able to learn a skill if he can't regulate at all? Which I think is the anxiety piece that Caleb is his biggest struggle, is that he has a very high drive, OCD, anxiety. And at that time when he was little, we didn't really know what was driving him and why was he so anxious and unable to calm his body. And it would take, 3 or 4 staff people to transition him, for transportation. Um, just lots of extra support that it just wasn't feasible, I think, for the local public school. They wanted him to be in a place that had a sensory room, that had smaller ratios in the classroom, so he could get more one-on-one attention from the special education teacher. Yeah, I think it was a lot of reasons, and ultimately the school system even said we just can't meet his needs. We love him. He's a great little boy, but we just can't meet his needs. So
What
yeah,
is elopement, and why can it be such a significant safety concern for families?
it's another great question. So I feel like when I always use the word elopement or I try to use the behavioral terms, a lot of people in the general public may not understand what it is. So yeah, exactly. So it's helpful to explain. Elopement and another behavior that is called bolting are two very common things, especially with an autism diagnosis at a young age. It is almost like the response that your nervous system has in fight or flight. So if you can't fight and your body wants to just escape. And a lot of times, what goes along with that elopement, which is like escaping an environment to move to another one, is that there is not much of a safety awareness component. So a lot of young individuals with autism in the more severe and profound, which is vastly different than more higher functioning on the spectrum because of needs. And we can talk about that in a little bit. But the elopement piece really is difficult because you want to keep your child safe, and oftentimes they when you're walking from your vehicle into the school, or you're um trying to go to the grocery store out in the community, and your child is just constantly trying to take off and run into traffic, and there's a lot of close calls that happened for me with Caleb, which was pretty traumatic. I could remember he would try to escape out the front door of our house. And at one point, I could remember chasing him. He was 4 years old, still in a diaper, and he just was bolting, running as fast as he could, and ran right in front of a UPS truck. And it's a miracle that that truck didn't hit him. But it was just like such a close call. I could remember so many instances like that, and that's really hard on parents, I think, at the young ages, and educators. But if you have another sibling as well, which I did, who's younger, it's impossible to keep both children safe, and go out into the community. So it can be quite isolating for families.
Does Caleb still elope?
It's a great question. Caleb still has the um, risk of elopement. However, I think with proper medications for anxiety, he has been able to be more regulated than when he was little. And he is able to, I think, lots of repetition and practice at his school. They would run programs teaching him how to transition from one place to the next and break those skills down. And so he did start to gain good skills like walking from a vehicle into let's say a grocery store, for instance, like I mentioned before. But what we now know is he needs 2 people on each side of him to sort of give his body that boundary and to sort of help him know where he is, and it helps direct him so that he can have more independence. So I guess to answer that question, sorry, he could potentially, but we prepare so that it doesn't happen. We prepare by helping the environments and setting up proper staffing for him. So,
How is the out of district different on a regular day?
wow, that's another really good question. Well, I'm gonna tell you that the school that Caleb went to up in Massachusetts was incredible because they would take the kids that no other schools would take. And so they believed in these kids, and I think that right there is a huge component. First of all, if you believe in the child and you don't just say, "Oh, they're never going to do this. They're too disabled or they're too, difficult or whatever." Their mission was to work with the kids regardless, and really just give them the best life possible in a more natural setting. So Caleb went from being, kind of contained in a little cubicle, which he hated, to going into this out of district school in Massachusetts that had natural environments set up that was able to protect him, so there weren't things in the environment that he could maybe eat or grab or get hurt on. And everything was individualized, so they looked at the individual student and said, we'll do whatever it takes to meet this student's needs, which most schools can't accommodate financially. So when a school has these specialized individual programs, a lot of times you see the kids really thrive and they start to gain skills. And that was our experience with Caleb. And it was consistency too. He
Is
knew
it
what
more
to.
due to budget restrictions or training?
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
Was it more due to budget restrictions or training?
I think training. I think training. Well, I would say both, because the budget restrictions in a public school setting limit the number of staff ratio. So if a student like Caleb needs a higher level of ratio, like he needed when he was younger, 3-to-1 at minimum. So it's really difficult to have three staff with an individual all the time in a public school that are trained in autism. So the out of district school that he went to, everybody was clinically trained. Every single staff person, no matter what the level was, knew Caleb's behavior plan, memorized it. They all were working together as a well-oiled machine. Everybody was on the same page. And then there was lots of support to pull from. So when staff would get tired working with Caleb, they could switch out with other staff. And that was very successful for him. Yeah.
How long after switching schools did you see progress?
I saw progress within a month. He was toileted when they said maybe he would never be able to. Yeah, I know. I was so proud of him. And so when I could never forget the feeling when I got the phone call that, hey, Caleb has been successful on the toilet, no more diapers. And that was awesome. Um, so I would say within a month, but then certain
At what
skills.
age did he switch schools?
He was 6. So when he was 5 years old, well, from public school, he went to an out of district school in Connecticut that was geared towards autism. But he was unable to make progress there as well. So he even needed it even higher. I know. So he ended up in children's psychiatric hospital because he was hurting himself so badly. So he was there for 6 months, and they were helping to stabilize medications and look for a real expert program that could meet that higher level of support that he needs. And that's when he got transitioned into Massachusetts. And he was 6. He had just turned 6, which was
Would
heartbreaking.
families deserve to have their children close to them regardless of their level of support needs?
Yes.
Can you talk about this?
Yeah, absolutely. That's my heart. Um, it was very difficult for me. It's not about me, just me. It's about, the whole family. I try not to focus on that. But my heart as a mom was broken because I never wanted to see my little baby boy be 3 hours away from me. And it was a grieving process. And I don't like to see people suffer. So to know that there are so many other families that are suffering with this exact same heartache because they want their child to be safe, they want them to have the best chance at gaining skills for their life, but oftentimes there isn't that level of support in the state that they live in. So they have or close to where they live, so that the child ends up having to be so far away from them, or even worse, inpatient hospitalization, which so many families are going through. They can't find a opening at any of these schools, so they end up stuck in a hospital setting, which is not appropriate for the child or the family. So yeah, that's really
Was
tough.
the
And
hospital before or after switching schools?
what hospital was Caleb at? Is it? Oh, sorry, I misunderstood the question.
Was the hospital before or after switching schools?
The hospital was while he was in the out of district school in Connecticut. It was right in the middle of that. So he had moved from public school to the autism school in Connecticut, and that's when he really started to have some struggles around age 5, 4 to 5 years old. It was getting pretty severe. And so that's when he went into the hospital. And then from the hospital, he got placed at his school in Massachusetts, which was a great match for him.
Was the hospital stay due to the school recommendation?
Um, the hospital stay was due to, um, I would say, multiple factors. The school was very supportive of him getting proper care and exploring what else he may need because they were struggling with him. And he started just really, the self-injury was so severe that we had to go to the emergency room just to keep him safe. And I said, I'm not leaving this emergency room until somebody helps my son. And so we were there in this little tiny room for 10 days and in the emergency room until they would find a bed for him in a children's psychiatric facility.
Doctors couldn't manage it out of patient beforehand.
Yeah, he couldn't manage out of patient care. Is that what you're saying? Yeah. Um, yeah, because he required so many people to help navigate his bolting elopement, being able to move from one location to the next, to reduce self-injurious behavior, aggression. Um, and he also had some other behaviors that are sometimes really hard for parents to talk about, which has to do with toileting. I don't know if you're familiar, but a lot of individuals with profound autism, when they're little, they have what's called fecal smearing. And That was also very difficult. And it's something I don't talk too much about because I want to respect Caleb's dignity. But it was a challenge all the way until he was toilet trained.
Were doctors not listening to you beforehand?
Yes. Well, that's a really great point. I think you're so perceptive, by the way. Um, the medical community in general um, didn't know what to do with Caleb when we would go to appointments. They weren't sure how to help him, and I think it was somewhat intimidating because 20 years ago, autism wasn't as well known as it is now, and his level of autism is also um, something that people are not used to seeing on an everyday basis. I think they are more now, 20 years later. Some medical doctors were much better than others. Some were more compassionate and gentle with him. But what we found over the years was incredible that the more you talk to Caleb and tell him what to expect, the better he would do. Yeah, so people just didn't assume that he could understand. And that was a huge thing. And so talking to Caleb and preparing him for what's next and having real simple communication and what I would call presuming competence always with him. Yes. Yep. It was a game changer for him. Game changer with medical appointments especially. He
How
started
did you
cooperating.
know that he was ready to come home?
Well, I didn't. That's the thing. What ended up happening is it was a real privilege for me. I got appointed on a state level for some advocacy positions. I was put on a task force to find out what are some of the gaps in services for people with adults with disabilities in Connecticut. And what I started to learn, I mean, I'm just going to be honest with you, it horrified me. There was so much abuse and neglect happening. There was so much mistreatment. And I said, screw that. Okay, that's exactly what I said to myself. I am not putting my son in that situation ever. So I started to try to, well, at first I tried to convince his school in Massachusetts to start a school in Connecticut. I was like, this is what I'll do. If they just come here, he'll be okay and he can get adult services with them when he graduates. Well, I mean, that was a big ask. And I tried for several years to advocate for a similar program to be developed, and I really wasn't getting anywhere. But I know, but what I was getting was the word out on a state level. People were starting to understand that there has to be programs developed for this population. I just didn't realize it was me that was going to start developing them because I was so overwhelmed by that. I was like, I can't do that. Like, I guess I just didn't believe in myself. Um, and then I realized I love my son so much that I have to do this. And so, yeah, that's when we took a huge risk and a huge, what I would call leap of faith, and got the house across the street from my house and started renovating it. And I started learning how does somebody develop an agency for a high level support need individual in adult services? And how could we make this sustainable? And also have the family right across the street. So when there's emergencies, we can run over and he knows we're here. And I'm also not alone. My husband, who's a big 6'5" guy, he can help Caleb when he's struggling, and he's very gentle and loving um and Caleb's dad and stepmom are right around the corner. And so like there's just how do we use our family support to give him this high level of care? So I started hiring caregivers and developing a plan to replicate what they did at his um, school in Massachusetts. So we replicated a lot of the programming that works for Caleb.
Was your family and friends always supportive even in the worst situations?
Ooh, that's a doozy. um, I think every person handles grief differently. And what may be the support that I might have needed at a certain time might not be what somebody else was able to give because they were going through their own grieving journey with Caleb because they loved him. So I always tried to be considerate of others, especially Caleb's sister, because I know how much she loved him and I know how hard it was to live in a high crisis household with him and then to see him go so far away. And I think part of the grief that comes with certain family members is you can't take personal offense when an individual with autism may not express their love and their affection for you in the way that you would be able to receive it. So you have to learn unconditional love, and that you have to be able to recognize it doesn't matter what they give back. I'm going to love them anyway,
Mm.
and not have expectations for what you want your child to be like. You have to lay that down and say, um, whatever my expectation for this idea that I had that I was going to have a child and they were going to be healthy and they were going to have this job and be successful and have their own family. If you can lay that down and say, how is my child a gift to everybody around them? And how are they changing the world? And how can I help facilitate that? Because if maybe he can't do it on his own, how can we as a family facilitate that change, that hope for others, and demonstrate it? You know, if I can demonstrate this kind of love with Caleb, maybe it would encourage other people.
Tell us about Caleb's strengths, expressions, and what he enjoys doing in the community and with his family.
Yeah, Caleb, well, since probably when Caleb was around 10, 12 years old, I started to kind of have this epiphany where when I spend time with him, what may not be a natural physical connection, it is almost a spiritual. I can communicate with him on a spirit level. When there's no words being spoken, we
Mm.
can get each other, you know?
Yeah.
I know you get that. And how do I develop that gift in myself? How do I become kind of like Caleb? Because he's tuned in. He's tuned into if you're anxious, if
Mm.
your body language, all these things that a lot of people don't pick up on, he's picking up on. So, how can I become more in tuned with his needs and what he's trying to say, even if no words are being spoken? And so I think one of his greatest strengths is he brings out a level of love in people, um, compassion, um, tenacity. Because when I look at him and I can see that he's struggling motor, wise to execute a task, being patient with him and encouraging him and seeing him not give up and push through it and seeing how proud he is of himself, it's an inspiration. So he's an inspiration just like you are. In that way, I don't think he could ever have the impact on the world around him, much like you, um, that he has if he did not have these so-called disabilities, because in a lot of ways they've become gifts.
Mm.
One story that stood out is how Caleb began choosing the routes his staff would take when driving. Can you share that story and why it mattered so much?
Sure. Yeah, no, that's great. Actually, that started at a very young age when Caleb used to have to be transported to school. He would start to point out the window and tell the driver when to turn to go home. And if the driver took a wrong route, he would definitely communicate, "You're going the wrong way." And he'd start to have anxiety, which tells me that his visual skills are so high. But when he went to his school in Massachusetts, I don't know that he was able to choose because he sort of had to. I mean, they gave him lots of independence and choice, but when you live in a house with other individuals, you kind of have to plan out your outings and activities, and you have to, kind of schedule out your day. Where now, as he's come home, we've been giving him choice where he's able to sort of choose his community outings, but um he is very adamant and wants to most of the time take you on a back route to the store to get candy. And or I'm going to give you a great example. One day the staff were driving him in the van and he was craving a fish sandwich from Saybrook Fish House, which is a restaurant that's about 20 minutes from where we live. And Caleb must have had it in his mind. I want Saybrook Fish House. I want a fish sandwich. And he had a whole menu list for lunch. This the staff didn't really know where he wanted to go because sometimes it's a little harder for him to use the iPad. So he only uses it when he is either really motivated or has the motor execution to be able to. So one day they were driving on all these back roads in this, town where there's not much going on, and the staff had never been on these roads before. And he took them all the way to the restaurant, like a whole back route, and said, "I want fish sandwich," as soon as they got into the parking lot. And they were like, "Oh, Caleb, you wanted to go to Saybrook Fish House. Thank you for driving us here." So wherever he is, he looks at his surroundings and tries to really rely on that, and then know, okay, where's the bathroom in a location? So he scans, and he memorizes items so that he feels a sense of safety. So that's pretty cool.
How did you figure out that he was saying that rather than just a behavior?
That is key. I think so many times people misunderstand the lack of communication as behavior. And that my heart is just like, oh my gosh, how many times did I miss it? How many times did we and the fact that he's so patient with us and so gracious, that blows me away. The strength that it must take to have that level of self-control. I understand his behaviors, and honestly, I would probably be much worse than he is if I couldn't get out what I wanted. But I think starting to believe in him and believe that he is more intelligent and more capable than he presents, and training the staff to also believe that, he then understands, okay, they're listening to me, and it actually encourages more communication. And then the behaviors can reduce, which is great.
How do you think he understands patience and all that stuff?
I think a lot of times I will see him get frustrated. I'll give you like a real specific. And he goes to aggress because he's so frustrated. And then he tries to hold himself back and he just gently like touches my hand. And he's like, oh, I don't want to hurt you, but I'm so frustrated. Are you listening? And I think always having his iPad available for him constantly adding language for him and giving him the opportunity. And if there's a time when he's unable to use the iPad, his one of his BCBAs over the years taught me, put your hands up like this and say, Caleb, do you want this or do you want this? Because sometimes just pointing to one hand is an easier motor execution than trying to do all of the, yeah, steps. So just learning those tools has been life-changing, and I think it encourages communication. Some days he's neurologically better than others. On the days when he's struggling neurologically, those are the hard communication days.
Are these skills from the out of school placement or the hospital?
Definitely his school in Massachusetts. They were amazing. Yeah. Definitely gained these skills because he's so complex, like I was saying, and people underestimate him. They didn't. And they gave him the opportunities again and again and again over 17 years to develop these skills and to show what is possible, which helped me to believe that it was possible and then gave me the tools to say, okay, if I replicate this at this high level, Caleb can thrive. And yeah, they definitely, and I'm a huge proponent of helping families with educational advocacy so they can get those types of services because they need them. These it could be a life changing for these families to get the right supports because then that individual can really blossom and show who they really are.
What happened after Caleb graduated from school, and what challenges did your family encounter during that transition?
Hmm. Yeah, I could remember it started about when I got the guardian. I had to do guardianship for Caleb when he turned 18. And as a mom, there's certain like milestones that you go through with your child, and you're like, okay, they're 18 now. Okay. Well, now I had to kind of relearn adult services and what the laws are. Yep. And say, okay, I better prepare. So when Caleb turned 18, I started to learn the adult services. And it was challenging because it's extremely complex and it's very different from educational. The laws are different and that we need a lot of reform. That's another story. But I think the challenges I went through emotionally was accepting that I was being called to demonstrate a new way with Caleb. And it was a wrestling kind of internal wrestle for myself because I had a lot of fear. I had fear of failure, fear of not being good enough for Caleb, not being able to, succeed, all of these different things. And so I really think I mean, that was one thing. I would say that the financial piece was also difficult because we didn't have the resources financially, and I always say God still made a way because my parents mortgaged the house and uh, took a line of credit out. We renovated this house and they showed me, like, hey, look, we're willing to go to this length. And so I was like, okay, they believe in me. So now I've got to step up and get this thing done for Caleb. So from 18 to 22, preparing for him because he graduated at 22, um, and allowing him to have more choice and more independence, and for me to be uh, accepting of my new life and my new schedule, and being in close proximity, available for emergencies. All of those things were adjustments. But I'm going to tell you the greatest thing that happened during that whole process was my heart was healed. My heart of missing my firstborn being so far away. I literally had this whole restoration happen internally. Now that Caleb is safe and home and close to us, and all these things I used to worry about, we've been able to overcome them. And so it's been a bonding and strengthening process for the whole family, and even for the caregivers that we have. I mean, that has been amazing that we've finally found several caregivers that love him and they know him and they listen to him, and they're there for him. And that's some of the hardest things to find is the people. Hmm. That people that will love him unconditionally like we do. And so I'm super grateful that we have those people because they help me to believe every day that we can do it together.
Tell us about Caleb today.
Hmm. You want me to tell you about Caleb, like what he's doing today or where he's at right now? Both? Sure. Um, okay. So yesterday, Caleb went to the zoo for the first time with his siblings and caregivers. So the coolest thing is, um, my staff for House of Hope has developed this board at his house with him. Caleb created it, and he loves popsicles. So, like, popsicles are an obsession for him, always have been. And so they made this board. It's called What I Want to Do This Summer, and it has all popsicles on it. And every popsicle has like a goal and a dream of a new thing that Caleb never did before. So one of them was go to the zoo with my siblings. And so he went yesterday and he was genuinely happy. And even though he may not always express it like we do, I could tell he was genuinely happy because the type of smile he had on his face in the pictures. And he was content. He wasn't trying to leave the zoo. He wanted to experience the zoo with his brother and sister, which was, I mean, that was a dream come true. Um, so pretty awesome stuff. So Caleb, in addition to doing new things out in the community, he's developing relationships at certain places that he goes locally, which is so cool because I've lived in this town my whole life. My parents, my grandparents, they've all had businesses here. My grandfather was a police officer. We know our local community really well, but Caleb never got to know them. So now everywhere Caleb goes, people are like, "Hi, Caleb." And he's like a celebrity, I swear. And that's beautiful to my heart because they're accepting him and they're getting to see what does profound autism look like out in the community. Okay, he has two people next to him. He looks like he might be struggling, or he look at him go. He's making, he's getting the groceries that he wants, or like, so I think it's educating people, and it's also showed me how much community support matters. It really does. I mean, I didn't realize it to this level. It's very humbling for me to have to go out there to my local community and say I need help. We can't do House of Hope alone. Sometimes saying I need help is some of the hardest things you have to say because it's so like you have to put your own pride aside of like I want to do it myself. And yeah, you're like that, I bet. Sure. And which is a good thing. You want to do it yourself, but there are times when you can't and you need help, and that sometimes is super hard. But there's a blessing on the other side of that, and that's that you get to bring in other people to your journey, and they're willing to show their love, and that's incredible.
How does he communicate today?
He communicates by either pointing his finger and saying like do like I do or I want something. And because we know him all so well, we're able to know what he wants. We set up his house exactly how he wants it. He has access to things that are part of his routine right where he wants them. He cleans everything himself. Like he's very OCD and takes a lot of pride in his house. but he uses his iPad with, as an AAC device. He uses touch chat software, and he's very successful with that. I would say the majority of the time.
Does he lives with peers?
Not yet, but we are looking for a roommate. So the house is beautiful. It's, I built a flower garden in the backyard and I'm trying to create like a happy place. But we were waiting to get our residential credentialing with the state so that we could take other individuals. Um, we just got approved for respite and residential. So now over the next 6 months, we're going to be looking at good matches or people that just want to come for short periods of time. And we want, in addition to that, we're going to replicate what we have done for other families.
Mm.
So House of Hope is working with housing developers to figure out how to build inclusive communities for this population near loved ones. And that's very exciting. It's People are very interested on a national level. So I keep sharing that we're going to have lots of houses of hope for so many.
Does he receive therapy too?
Yeah, well, right now he graduated from PT, which is huge feat. So he doesn't need PT anymore. Um, we incorporate some sensory and OT like life skill type activities, but he doesn't need OT really, on a daily basis anymore. He does get BCBA clinical care therapy, and that's really important to sort of check the data and say, okay, where's he at? How can we change something? And then it also helps with training the people that work with him.
Did you transition?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that was the last
To
of the
adult
question.
doctors?
Okay, I knew you had more. Um, yes, we did. That was challenging. It's still challenging to find doctors.
Mm.
But we have a good one, primary now, thank God. And she understands she has a child with autism. Yeah. And so thankfully for that. Psychiatry is always a challenge in Connecticut. It seems like I wouldn't say in Connecticut. It's not Connecticut. It's Northwest Connecticut where I live is pretty rural. So, that can be a challenge to find very specific providers.
Thank you for doing this with me.
Oh, are you kidding? Thank you.